I was 9 minutes from boarding the Solenne when a requisition clerk flagged my transfer chip for a supply discrepancy nobody has ever been able to explain to me. And that 9 minutes is the only reason I am alive to tell you what the Hesper Concord did to 340 people who are not. I watched it happen from the staging platform at Hesper, on a feed 3 relay hops removed from real time. The Solenne was broadcasting on all 3 medical channels the way she always did, transponder clean, hull lit white with the old red cross we'd painted on ourselves because the Concord's own glyph for non-combatant changes every few decades and nobody trusts it anymore. She was carrying wounded pulled out of the Tallow Ridge skirmish 2 days before, men and women who had already survived the worst thing that was supposed to happen to them. The Concord cruiser Etherbound Vow closed to engagement range and fired 3 volleys into her spine. The Solenne broke amidships and went dark in under a minute. No distress call got out. There wasn't time. I knew most of the crew. 11 medics, a surgeon named Halvard who'd pulled 2 of my own people through a bad decompression the year before, a quartermaster who collected scrap metal birds and gave them away at every port. I'd packed my own kit that morning believing I'd be standing in Halvard's surgical bay within the hour. Instead, I stood on a platform deck watching a sensor plot turn the Solenne's icon from green to a flat administrative gray, the kind reserved for hulls no longer worth tracking. I want to tell you it was hatred. It would almost be easier. It wasn't. The Hesper Concord runs on a 400-year-old vessel identification ledger, and Earth had never finished the registration paperwork their bureaus required, 11 separate filings, 3 of them contradictory. The kind of administrative maze a species learns to live inside rather than win. Under Directive 7, any hull absent from the ledger inside contested space is presumed hostile and is to be engaged without further verification, markings notwithstanding. The captain of the Etherbound Vow followed his orders precisely. That is the whole of his defense, and it is true. I requested transfer to the flagship Meridian 11 hours later. I did not ask why. By then it didn't need asking. The Vigil fleet was not built that week. It had been staged in pieces for 3 years, ever since the second incident, a Concord patrol that hauled an unarmed Earth survey ship over a paperwork gap and called it regrettable. We had warned them twice through formal channels that Directive 7 would eventually kill people wearing a cross instead of a weapon. Both warnings were filed. Neither was acted on. What changed wasn't the warning. It was the number. Admiral Imogen Vasco gave her orders from the Meridian's bridge in a voice with nothing in it. 6 expeditionary task forces, 1,100 hulls total, cross-decked supply already loaded, jump solutions already plotted, contingency work nobody had hoped to use. There were no speeches. I remember that most clearly, because I had braced for one and none came. We loaded the wounded bays instead, racked the trauma kits, and waited. The task forces came in over the next 9 hours from 4 different staging depots, each one reporting status in the same flat cadence. 1st Expeditionary, full strength, on station. 3rd Expeditionary, full strength, on station. A carrier group out of the Holloway yards arrived 2 hours ahead of schedule because its captain had broken her own refit timeline rather than be late. Nobody thanked her for it out loud. Nobody needed to. By the 9th hour all 6 task forces had reported, and the staging plot at Hesper showed more Earth tonnage assembled in one place than I had ever seen in 12 years of service. The ultimatum went out on every channel the Concord monitored, plain language, no threats dressed as questions, surrender the commanding officer of the Etherbound Vow and the administrator who authorized Directive 7 within 24 hours, or the Concord's capacity to wage war in this sector ends. Their answer came back 18 hours later, routed through 4 departments. A formal review of Directive 7 had been scheduled for the next standard cycle, 11 months out. The directive itself would remain in force during the review period, for operational continuity. They did not refuse out of defiance. They refused because their system was structurally incapable of moving faster than its own process, even with annihilation sitting on the calendar. That, more than the strike itself, is what I understood that night. It was never cruelty driving any of it. It was a machine that could not stop itself, run by people who would not. The 24 hours ran out at 0600 fleet time. I was in the aft trauma bay finishing inventory I didn't need to finish, because my hands wanted work and there wasn't any yet. Word came down the line ship by ship, not as an announcement but as a change in the hum under the deck plating, drive cores spinning up across 1100 hulls at once. The Concord's listening posts along the border went dark one after another as the fleet crossed, not from weapons fire but because each post's monitoring crew abandoned post the moment they understood what was inbound and at what scale. The ultimatum had already done half the work. Fear is a kind of compliance too, when the math is bad enough. We reached Varen's Reach, the Concord's primary shipyard world, for centuries of drive yards, fabrication rings, and command relay towers stacked across 2 moons and the planet below, in 11 hours. Earth gave the planet a 6-hour evacuation window before a single shot was fired. That detail matters more than anything that came after it. Vasco didn't do it for mercy's sake alone, she did it so that what followed couldn't be mistaken for anything but exact. Every klaxon on Varen's Reach sounded on Earth's signal, in the Concord's own emergency protocol, because we had cracked it years ago and never told them. Civilian transports lifted by the hundreds. Military and administrative personnel who chose to remain at their posts did so knowing what the warning meant. Then the Vigil fleet went to work. Not a bombardment, a dismantling. Each task force took an assigned ring, drive yards first, then fabrication lines, then the command relay towers that let the Concord coordinate a fleet larger than a single sector watch. 2nd Expeditionary reported the lower drive yard offline 40 minutes in. 4th Expeditionary took the fabrication rings 2 hours after that, methodical, target by target, no hull-breaking formation to chase a kill that wasn't on the list. 6th Expeditionary held back from the relay towers until the last evacuation transport cleared the inner moon, then took all 4 towers inside 11 minutes. 6 hours of precise, sequential strikes, every target a structure, none of them a home. By the close of it, 400 years of Concord war-making capacity in that sector did not exist anymore, and the planet's population, evacuated to the letter, did. I treated burns and decompression cases on the Meridian through most of it, the same work I'd have been doing on the Solenne if 9 minutes had gone differently. A junior corpsman named Oduya worked the bed next to mine without speaking for the first 3 hours, then asked me once, quietly, if it was supposed to feel like nothing. I told her it wasn't supposed to feel like anything yet. That came later, for both of us, in pieces. Somewhere in the middle of that shift, word came through that Concord Internal Security had located the administrator who'd kept Directive 7 in force through 2 prior warnings, sitting in his office on Varen's Reach, having refused his own evacuation order in some private calculus I will never understand. He was taken into custody without incident and processed through proper channels, same as the captain of the Etherbound Vow, who surrendered himself the following day, alone, on an open channel, without escort or condition. No one gloated over either man. No one needed to. The point had already been made at a scale no speech could have carried. The Hesper Concord rewrote Directive 7 within the week, full verification required, ledger gaps no longer presumed hostile, the change ratified faster than anything in their bureaucracy's recorded history. It took them 400 years to build a ledger that could get a hospital ship killed, and 6 hours to learn exactly what that ledger had cost. I still have the Solenne's manifest. 340 names. I read it once a year, on the day, standing watch in a bay I was never meant to survive missing. The fleet moved on to other border stations eventually, the alert stood down, the work folded back into ordinary maintenance and ordinary grief. But Varen's Reach stayed dark for a long time after, and every Concord pilot who flew past it afterward understood, without anyone explaining it to them twice, exactly what kind of species they had been filing paperwork against.